Now, for a variety of reasons, the Kennedys were quite important in my young life. As a 6-year-old, I could recite substantial sections of President John Kennedy's inaugural address. We had the portrait of the American president on our wall, next to the Pope, just under the Pope, slightly below the Pope. It was very important for us, a person of Irish ethnicity and the Roman Catholic faith becoming president in redneck, WASP America was an important breakthrough for us, or so we felt. We saw them as, I suppose, I didn't think so at the time, but I now can see that we saw them, if you like, as a Camelot, a kind of Arthurian American royalty. I loved Jack Kennedy. I wept when he was murdered. I recall vividly when my father came out to go and play darts on a Friday night, as he normally did, and said that the president had been killed. And I wept there on the pavement at the age of 9. Just 4 years later, then politically active teenager, I saw the billboard of the Evening Telegraph, the local Dundee newspaper, and the billboard said that Bobby Kennedy had been murdered. And I wept again on a pavement in the street. When Ted Kennedy ran for president, I gave our now editor, my then intrepid friend, Ron Mackay, a journalist who was in the United States covering the presidential nominations when Ted Kennedy was running for the Democratic nomination, 1980. I gave my friend, I think, a £10 note, a Scottish £10 note, with a letter, and asked him to give it to Bobby Kennedy, Ted Kennedy, for his election campaign. And I got a very good, nice letter from Senator Kennedy after he had failed. So what I'm trying to say is, I don't really like the besmirching of the Kennedy name. And so when I heard about this new book called Bombshell, The Night Bobby Kennedy Killed Marilyn Monroe, I didn't like it much. But I didn't dislike it enough to discount it, and certainly not to refuse a platform to the author of the book, who joins me now. He's Douglas Thompson. Douglas, welcome to the mother of all talk shows. It's quite a shocking idea that the Attorney General, the brother of the slain president, murdered an icon like Marilyn Monroe, murdered anybody. How do you justify that?
Source for the material is Mike Rothman, very much a patriotic American who, like you, was a Kennedy fan and a man distraught when he went through the files of the intelligence division of the LAPD, the Los Angeles Police Department, evidence which pointed towards the culpability of Bobby Kennedy being involved in the death of Marilyn Monroe. Mike found all this out during 10 years with the LAPD when he went through all the files, secret files. He wrote about them in '92, making mention of Marilyn Monroe, but not getting into the detail at that time. He didn't think America was particularly ready for it then. Subsequently, lots of questions that came up at the time of Marilyn's death in '62 about where Bobby Kennedy was Was he in Los Angeles when it happened? Was he not? It was denied by Bobby Kennedy, denied by all the authorities, especially the man who became the chief of police, Darrell Gates. Subsequently, in 1985, Darrell Gates admits in his book that he knew all along that Bobby Kennedy was in town. A couple of years later, a Beverly Hills policeman acknowledges that he stopped the Attorney General and his brother-in-law, Peter Lawford, the night that Marilyn Monroe died. All circumstantial, but it all put Bobby Kennedy smack in the middle of Los Angeles when it happened, which had been vociferously denied until that point.
Douglas, what would be the motive for Bobby Kennedy bumping off Marilyn Monroe?
At that point, the Kennedys were coming up to they were looking toward the next election. They remembered, of course, you're talking at a time just coming out of the 1950s, Eisenhower, crew cuts, the short haircut, the whole kind of middle America attitude toward philandering, and just really the behavior of the president, the behavior of Bobby Kennedy. And I think they were threatened by Marilyn Monroe, who was about to have a press conference on the Monday of the following the weekend in which she died, to announce that she'd been having an affair with the Kennedys, the brothers, that they talked to her about Cuba, about Castro. So it would have been a political end to the Kennedys at that point. So that was the motivation.
But you would have had to kill a lot of women, Douglas, because Jack Kennedy was basically banging anything with a pulse, including in the White House. What was so special about this one?
Well, exactly. But as you would have realized, I think it was last weekend, there's the revelation of an intern that she'd had an affair, a real Me Too type of affair with Kennedy back in the White House. But of course, all of this material was being sat on by the press. Secret Service agents never said anything. It really was a lid on it. Nobody else was threatening to go public. Nobody else was as big, really, in that sense, as Marilyn Monroe. And Joe Kennedy, the patriarch of the Kennedy family, had been having an affair with Gloria Swanson in full view of all of Hollywood for years, and no one had ever, there was never a mention of it. So I think the Marlon was it just was a threat to them. I take your point that there were plenty other possible targets for them, but I think if she was the only one that was going to come out of the woodwork.
I know the Kennedy brothers were close, but were they really that close that they'd both be sleeping with the same woman?
Oh, there seems to be, from all the surveillance of them, from the testimony from the wiretaps that were, Marlon's home was wiretapped. Peter Lawford, the brother-in-law's home, is wiretapped. They're wiretapping, party houses all across Los Angeles. And Kennedy himself was spotted by by the OCID, the intelligence division, with Marlon. There's photographs of him with Marlon, and obviously they've got Bobby Kennedy with her as well. So I think it's and from what Mike Rothman saw in the files, which was this diary, which he took contemporaneous notes of it at the time, and there are some parts he just didn't know what she was talking about, left them out. But he had, various mentions of both Kennedys, of Jack Kennedy sleeping with her, with Bobby Kennedy sleeping with her, and what they were saying, and going into the details of the relationships, which, we go into in the book. The the thing is, the fact that Bobby Kennedy kills Marilyn Monroe is the headline, but I think the whole book shows the LAPD working like a Praetorian Guard for the Kennedys, going back into the 1950s all the way through. And it's the cover-up, which, in a sense, when you get into it, is even more shocking than the actual event.
They certainly won a Praetorian Guard for Bobby on the night that he was murdered in that very same state of California. But J. Edgar Hoover hated the Kennedys with a vengeance. If all this was known, why wouldn't Hoover have ensured that was all in the public domain?
Hoover, at that point, the Kennedys, Bill Parker is the chief of the LAPD. He is in the running through the Kennedys to replace Hoover as head of the FBI. Hoover has the dirty material on the Kennedys and is using it on them to stay in position. So that's why Hoover had the information, but it was in his interest not to make it public, but to use it as leverage with the Kennedys.
Now, Douglas, how up close and personal does the book allege that Bobby got to Marilyn on the night of the killing, as the book contends? I mean, are we really saying he killed her with his own hands, or did he cause her to be killed?
Oh, well, I'll take you through how it happens. Bobby Kennedy, this is the story given to Mike Rothman by Peter Lawford, who was in the room when Marilyn died with Bobby Kennedy. What happens is that Bobby Kennedy arrives in Los Angeles, goes to see Marilyn at her home at lunchtime on the day she dies. It doesn't go well. There's arguments. There's a lot of animosity about what she's going to say, what she's not going to say. And there's a sort of search for a diary and paperwork. Various people had been at the home earlier in the day. They now vanish, are out of the scene before this kind of contretemps goes on. That night, Peter Lawford and Bobby Kennedy return. The scene becomes much more hysterical. Peter Lawford is in the room trying to calm Marilyn down. Bobby Kennedy seems to kind of go out of the picture for a moment. And Lawford gets Marilyn to sort of calm down for a bit. It gets her sitting down on the couch. And then Bobby Kennedy comes back into the room with a glass of water in which he's stirring something, which he then says, "This will help you, Marilyn. This will calm you down." She doesn't want to drink it. Peter Lawford encourages her to drink it, saying, again, this will help you, just because she really is at this point hysterical. She drinks the liquid, which is by then clear. Within a few seconds, according to Lawford, she's comatose, and within little more time, she's dead. At that point, he's freaking. Bobby Kennedy seems to be more together than one must presume. He was pretty distraught too, but according to Lawford, more together than he was. What are we going to do? Kennedy says, we've got to get out of here. They go to the door. As they go out, LAPD guy is coming in the door. At that point, Kennedy and Lawford leave. That's when they're stopped driving at speed. Lawford is speeding in Beverly Hills. The cop stops him, recognizes Lawford, and Lawford says, I'm taking the Attorney General to the airport. And the cop says, you're going the wrong way. So he reverses on Pico Boulevard and off he goes. At the same time, the OCID cops are cleaning up the what you would call it, a crime scene. At that point, there is an official call to the LAPD that Marilyn Monroe is dead. And a guy called Sergeant Jack Clemens is the first official policeman to arrive at the scene. He's a guy who contacted Mike Rothman after Mike made mention of it in '92, and worked with him, information which is in the book. And Mike got a lot of stuff from Clemens, who was badmouthed by the LAPD and kind of turned into a bit of an outsider, because he said that what had happened was that there were several photographs of Marilyn holding a phone, positioned this way and that way. And obviously the body had been moved. There was evidence of sort of liver damage in the back, where a body would have had to have been turned about like a mannequin, really. So all of that was happening as Bobby Kennedy is flying off up to San Francisco area, where he was on a family visit, rejoins his family and vanishes. And then from then on, all the various stories, Lawford's story, everybody else, the ambulance man, everybody else, is basically written by OCID. And that's the story that was given to the public. It was a suicide. It was, and of course, being that time, 60, again, back to the Eisenhower, you believed what authorities told you. You believed the police, you believed the government, you believed the council, you believed everyone. But that's what it was. It was a story. And, since then there's been more books, more films about what happened than more films than Marilyn Monroe ever appeared in, I would think. But I think Mike got to the core of it through placing Bobby in the room with the drink. I think in the book we say he killed her. When people say, murdered her, I don't know if you got a conviction of murder under Californian law. It would probably be manslaughter.
Well, I don't know. It's quite obviously premeditated. If, as they're leaving the house,
yes,
a cleanup squad is coming in, it's clearly a murder, because it's premeditated, and indeed there's a conspiracy to kill her. So it's murder in the first degree.
The only problem with that, of course, is he's the Attorney General at that time. So, and the LAPD are, yes, but I take your point. Yes, I mean, it's the, and I think I went into at great length because Gary Allen Powers, who was the spy in the sky when I was in Los Angeles, he was the weatherman in a helicopter, but he was the American spy plane guy who was exchanged for the Russian spy.
He was the
Gary
one
Allen Powers,
shot down, yeah.
Well, when he was shot down, yes, exactly. Sorry, but he was given a particular poison, so that if he was shot down, he would take this like a cyanide pill. It wasn't a cyanide pill, but similar to that. It was like a silver dollar, the size of a silver dollar, and with a pill inside it. And Gary had as it turned out, the good sense not to take it. But at the same when that was being developed, it was exactly the same time, and it was being developed by a CIA associate who worked with Bobby Kennedy. So you go into the realms of the conspiracy, the availability of the poison, and so on.
And yet, Douglas,
yeah.
the cynic will say all the people involved in this story are helpfully dead. None can sue, and the diary, the documents that the police officer was relying upon have never materialized, never surfaced. So this could just be a down-at-heel, disgruntled LAPD detective selling a story.
It could be, but the problem is that he became a very serious intelligence consultant over many years
That makes him more suspicious, not less.
Okay, well, but he also gave evidence into the assassination of Bobby Kennedy to a grand jury because of his expertise. He's been helping Bobby Kennedy Jr. looking into the assassination of his father. The files, when he first wrote about the files in '92, the building where they were housed was I was going to say handcuffed, but it was chained up by the then police chief, and all the files were then sealed. And he has, as I say, he's got very good notes of everything that he read and the folders. And it's not just on the Marilyn Monroe case. It goes into, and in the book we talk about the, various governors, movie stars, people. Just they wanted material which gave them leverage on anybody. So I think the book makes a considered case for the prosecution. We say that with the evidence, we think we'd get a conviction from it. But I think it needs to be read further than the headline to get the full picture of the circumstances where this would happen. I think anybody is, I was going to say foolish. I suppose that's the right word. Anyone is foolish to accept anything is 100% certain. But I would think this is certainly in the high 90s of the circumstances of Marilyn Monroe's death, of actually what happened.
Douglas Thompson, author of Bombshell, The Night Bobby Kennedy Killed Marilyn Monroe. Thank you for joining us on the mother
thank you for having me.
of all talk shows.